Now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Jacqueline Peros is a Master Certified Personal Brand Strategist. She works at inspiring and preparing underserved women to confidently seek fulfilling careers through her company, JMP Branding. She has participated in many center programs, and we're so grateful she could join us today. Now over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Kate, for the intro. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to talk about how to succeed in the hybrid workplace. But I'm super curious, before we kind of go into our session today, I wanted to do a quick poll to kind of gauge how you all feel about this new hybrid model. So we're going to throw up a poll. And if you could take a minute, less than 10 seconds and fill it out. How do you feel about the hybrid workplace? Do you love the idea? I'd prefer to be in the office full time, or currently indifferent to hybrid model. Okay, so wow, I am so excited. So all of you love the idea, which is great, right? Because that's what we're doing here. We're going to talk about how to succeed in the hybrid workplace. So let's get started. Let's go to the next slide. So before I go into the strategies on how you can successfully navigate the hybrid model, I wanted to really talk about some of the trends that we're going to see in 2022. And Korn Ferry just came out with a very in-depth study on what we're going to see in 2022. So I wanted to just, if you remember nothing from this presentation, just remember this one thing. And that is that 2022 will be the year of the employee. So that's great news for all of you. So let me quickly go through some of these work trends so you can understand what you're going to be working in the coming year. So the first one is reinvention. So reinvention is basically going to be where companies are going to really focus on upskilling and reskilling employees, right? The emphasis is going to be less on an employee's job, how they perform the job, and more about what their capabilities are, and also looking at the technologies, right? So in the past, attention and attraction and retention for organizations really was something that was a numbers game. But here in the reinvention stage, they're really going to really look at your capabilities. And it's interesting because one of the things that I used to tell my clients is that you never want to be known for your job function. You really want to be known for those superpowers, that unique gift that you have, right? And so I'm happy to see that organizations are really going to start to focus on what your capabilities are. The second future trend is scarcity. So there are currently 11 million unfilled jobs in the US alone. So organizations are really going to focus a lot on these retention and attraction initiatives on a much wider scale and really understand employees and what they need on a much deeper level. So again, thinking about the employee. And the third one is vitality. So vitality is really about the employee well-being taking center stage, right? So before COVID, self-care was becoming popular. But now what they really want to focus on is ensuring employee engagement, understanding your career and your purpose. And one thing that I forgot to mention in the beginning of the future of work trends paper is that there's going to be a power shift in 2022. And this is important because it sort of frames all of these trends. The shift is going to go from organizations to people. It's going to go from profit to mutual prosperity. And then it's going to go from we it's going to go from me to we, right? So organizations are really going to take much more community-based approach to how they engage with you as an employee. So going back to our trends, sustainability. So sustainability is really companies are going to be transparent about their environmental, social, and governance initiatives, right? So they want employees to understand where they stand within those initiatives. And they also want employees to have a voice and participate in this and help reinforce these initiatives in the company. And then we have individuality. So there's going to be less focus on employees' demographics. So in the past, employers would categorize employees or look at the demographics. So they would say, okay, this is a new engineering graduate. This is an intern turned full-time employee, or this is a new mom returner, right? It's really going to be less about the demographics. And what they're going to really do is have an individual approach to understanding employees on a different and deeper level. And then we have inclusivity. And so this is going to be, you're going to see a rise in purpose-led organizations, right? So this is where the shift from, me to we comes in. It's that community approach, right? Looking at diversity initiative, inclusivity and diversity really coming to the forefront. We've heard a lot about it. I've participated in the summit here, the diversity summit. But now organizations are really going to make sure that there's transparency in these types of initiatives and have you become even more part of it. And then the last one is accountability. So in order to make this hybrid work model be successful for all parties, there has to be trust between the corporation, leadership, and the individual. Everyone needs to trust that they are doing their job when they're working remote. So now that we have a quick understanding of where we're going, let's talk about the 5 strategies that I've highlighted that we're going to go through to make this really work for you. So next slide. Thank you. So number 1, the first strategy is to really understand the hybrid policy. This is all about expectations, right? So when we talk, so it's really understanding what they expect of you and what you expect of them, right? When you're assessing the potential opportunity, or maybe you're currently working in this model and you want to really make sure it works for you. So this is everything from understanding what your schedule is, right? Do you need 3 days in the office, or can you do 2 days, 2 days in the office and 3 days working remotely? Are you going to be making that decision, or is the employer going to tell you this is when you need to be in the office and this is when you can work remotely, right? It's really understanding what that expectation is, and also understanding what are the hours. You know, as we move to remote, you know, there's this gray area of, okay, when can I shut down? When do I not have to be available? So understanding what the expectation is of you for work hours. And then also understanding from a performance review perspective, right? So will your performance reviews take place virtually, or maybe they are going to take place in person, right? What's going to work best for you? And how are the performance metrics going to be factored into your review while working remotely? So it's really understanding how this is going to work best for your employer and work best for you. And having an understanding of some of these things will really benefit you. And then also, you know, if you're an early careerist, or if you're looking at opportunities right now, having a mentor or a sponsor in an organization is really important for career succession, right? So having the knowledge of whether or not you're going to have a sponsor, and how is that relationship going to work remotely, or does it need to be in person? So again, these are things that understanding the policy is, I tell my clients, you really have to understand this. And then the last thing is, what resources do you need, and will the company provide, say, technological resources to make sure that when you're working remotely, you are efficiently and effectively doing your job. So let's go to number 2, the second strategy. So this is one of my favorite strategies that I work with on my clients. And this is build your brand community, which another word could be your network, right? And so really building and nurturing your network is going to help your career, okay? It's one of those important elements of having a successful career that I think some people don't fully understand. And so having opportunities like this summit is a great way for you to start to think about your network if you haven't already. So I want to go to the next slide and really talk about 2 different types of networks that you understand really what to be building. So there are 2 networks. There's an open network and a closed network. So an open network is a network where you have different pockets of contacts. So for example, for those on the call, if you are currently a college student, your pockets could include your college peers, your professors. If you're working part-time, maybe it's your work colleagues and your supervisors there. It could be any associations that you belong to, hobbies or interests, right? So that's an open network. A closed network is when you have just a single pocket of contacts. So if I was operating in a closed network, that pocket would consist only of personal branding strategists, and that's it. So which one is better? Well, the goal is for you to strive to have an open network. Why? Because an open network really provides a greater opportunity for diversity of thoughts and ideas, right? But not only that, it also takes your brand, right? And it communicates your brand to other communities outside of your pockets, right? So it gives you more visibility. And with that, there could be additional opportunities that you have access to. So if we look at the next slide, I just wanted to point this slide out because it does a really good job of demonstrating the importance of a network. There's a network scientist who created this slide. His name is Ron Burt. He, for many, many years, studied the impact of an open network and how it impacts one's success. And what he concluded over many years of this research was that having or operating in an open network is the best predictor of career success. So next slide. So you might be asking, well, how do I start to build my brand community or my network? And so before I get into these 4 pillars here, the one thing I would like to stress for all of you is before you even start to identify your network, it's important for you to understand or write down your career goals. Where do you want to be in 1 or 3, 5 years, right? And so once you have an understanding of that, it's easier to point your brand in the right direction, okay? So once you have your goals, you then take a look and say, okay, well, who's in my current network that can help me achieve those goals? And once you identify that, you then take a look where you perform what I call a gap analysis and understand who needs to be in my network now in order to help me achieve my goals, right? So it's really understanding who you need to start to work on developing those relationships with. And I think it's really important to add members regularly. So don't stop networking, do it as often as you can, and also nurture your network. So I think oftentimes we do a great job of adding members, but we don't necessarily engage our members, right? So what I find super helpful, and you might find this too, we all have busy lives, right? You have school, you have work, you have associations, you have all things that you're doing. However, it is important to carve out some time, right? So some of my clients will do 3 to 5 minutes a day, identifying people that they haven't connected with in a while. And so maybe they'll send them an email, or maybe they'll send them a note on LinkedIn and say, hey, how are you doing? Or they might find a resource that they think someone in their network might appreciate, so they send it out to them. So, or you can do it, carve out an hour a week and be strategic about it, be intentional, right? And so that's another way that you can nurture your network. And you have such an opportunity here to really start to network with, your peers or the presenters, send them a note, connect with them on LinkedIn. This group is always fantastic because I always get LinkedIn requests after my presentation saying, oh, I found your information valuable. I want to connect with you. So keep doing that. I think it's just a great opportunity to build your community, your brand community. And it's interesting because I just want to tell you a quick story. This is, I think, a really great networking story. So a few years ago, I led a workshop for the Center for Communication, one of their summits, and it was in person. So it was before COVID. And after the workshop, there was an attendee who came up to me and she said, oh, I really appreciated all of this information that you provided. And I think my university that I just graduated from would really appreciate this. And it's really a unique perspective. So she ended up putting me in touch with her career department. And I ended up doing a few workshops for the undergrad and graduate students. I did a series of workshops there. She then mentioned to me that she had just gotten a job at a big tech firm here in New York City. And so it happened to be a tech company that my husband has been working at for a number of years, and he's an executive. So I connected them, and she set up a meeting, and she now has an advocate at this tech company that she would not have had if we didn't have that networking opportunity. And I think it's a great example of how effective networking can be. And just a reminder that networking is about providing value to both parties, right? So we were both able to expand our network based on this exchange. So I think it's just a great opportunity for you here. And I know that after this session, you have a networking event. So, really take the time to, get out of your comfort zone, introduce yourself to someone, speak up. And what I'd like to do is, what I prepared for you guys was a framework to jumpstart your brand building strategy. So we're gonna dump that into the chat, and you can take a look at it. I included a few other articles that I've written that might be helpful for you, but it's a networking guide, and it's a framework for you to just kind of jumpstart it and I gave you some ideas in there on how to do that. Okay, so next slide, please. So number 3 is put your best brand forward. And so what I mean by that is, and how I define a brand, a personal brand, is simply put, it's your unique value of promise. And so as you move into the hybrid workplace, it's really important that you have a transparent brand. And by that, I mean, who you show up virtually should be very similar to the person that shows up in the office. So if we can go to the next slide. So for those that are interviewing, right, we now have, I think there was a stat recently that said there was 90% of employers check social media before hiring an employee, right? And so this concept, digital first, was a term coined by a gentleman named Mitch Joel. And Mitch wrote a book called Control Alt Delete. And essentially what he was saying is that more often than not, we meet people online for the first time, right? No longer are we meeting people in person. And this is even before COVID. And so the concept of first impressions is really important because it takes about 7 seconds for someone to form an opinion of you, whether it's good or bad. So it's important, and I always tell my clients, it's up to us to define our brand so others aren't doing it for us, right? And so we really have to take a step back and understand what our digital footprint looks like. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to emphasize the importance of first impressions. And the reason why they're so important is based on two concepts. One is the primacy effect. And the primacy effect is the tendency for us to remember the very first piece of information we receive, even after information that is received later on, okay? If you go to the next slide. Now, anchoring is the second concept, underscoring the importance of first impressions. Once we receive that information, it gets stored in our long-term memory, right? So that's good and bad, right? So if we present a favorable impression, right? If somebody Googles us and we have a very strong brand and it really it supports who we are, well, that's great. So the impression, that favorable impression, is stored in a long-term memory. However, if in fact it's not a good first impression, that gets stored in. And even if we present information later on that is contrary to that negative impression, it doesn't matter. People still hold on to that negative impression. So if we can go to the next slide. So just really quick, I just want to do a quick poll. So Bri, if you can put that poll up. I'm curious to see how many of you regularly Google your name to see really what's up. So what's out there on you. So let's take 10 seconds. Let's answer this poll. Okay. So about 50% of you occasionally will Google yourself. 14% are on top of it, and 36% say never. I really urge all of you to really start to assess your digital footprint, really understand what is going on, what is out there about you. Because as I said earlier, 90% of employers will look at your social media platforms to get a better understanding of who you are. But in order to do that, a couple of things I just want to point out. I really urge you, a to-do for those that majority of you that don't do it regularly. Really, it's important to do it regularly. Do it so that you can see what an employer sees, right? So first and foremost, make sure you set your browser to incognito or private mode and log out of all of your Google accounts, okay? This will give you the purest results. It will really reflect what others see when they research you, right? And you could use variations of your name and nicknames, right? Because somebody is going to, you're not really quite sure how somebody's going to research you, but somebody might research me, Jacqueline Peros, New York City, right? And so, do variations of your name and your location. And make sure you search through the first 5 pages of the results. And I say this, not many people will go past the first page, but you really want to make sure that whatever out there, the images or videos, etc., really support and enhance your personal brand. And so if there are any images that you don't want out there, just make sure you kind of get off the internet. So these are just a couple of things that are important when it comes to your digital footprint. And don't forget, even when you start to work in the office, you're going to be meeting people that don't really know you. And so what do? They're going to Google you, right? So you want to make sure that anything that comes up isn't going to tarnish your brand reputation. If we can go to the next slide. And so I just wanted to give you a couple of a few tech resources that you can use. These are free. So TalkWalker is an app that you can download, and you can put your name in there, and it'll come up with when someone writes anything about you or just your name pops up. You can really manage and monitor what's out there, right? So TalkWalker, I've used TalkWalker a few times. Some of my colleagues love it. They think it's great. I personally don't think it's as intuitive as it could be, but you can try it. It might work for you. And of course, Google Alerts. Make sure you Google your name and see what comes up. Keep that ongoing. And the next resource, which is called Mention, I do use this one, and I like this. I think it's much more intuitive, but it's an opportunity for you to really monitor your brand, right? And so the work that I do with a lot of my clients is I help uncover the brand that's already inside of them. And so once we do that and we create a communication strategy, we identify who their target audience is, we then set up these systems that they can monitor to make sure that they're monitoring it and being proactive if anything should come up that could potentially damage their reputation. So if we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Bree. So I think this is super important. Brand consistency leads to brand credibility. So when you're out there and you're showing up consistently, right? You're showing up consistently in the office, you're showing up consistently virtually, it really provides credibility for your brand. So keep that in mind on how you can really leverage this new hybrid work model to make it successful for you. So number 4 is communicating your brand with impact. So we can go to the next slide. So this is an interesting chart. So I think sometimes we think that when we communicate, we're defining communication by just being verbal, right? But 93% of our communication is done, it's nonverbal communication, right? So how we show up and how we communicate, people are looking at that too, right? So for example, if you're on an interview, you have an interview call, and you're really excited about the potential opportunity, and you're speaking about it, but you're not, there's no inflection in your tone, in your voice, then somebody might think that you're not that excited about the position, right? So paying attention to your nonverbal cues will really help you navigate the workplace and virtually, right? So when you're on, say you get scheduled for a virtual meeting and you're working remote that day and you have a bunch of meetings back to back, it's important that you stay energized, you make sure you remember to smile, there's no slouching, right? You don't look bored. So there are certain things, body language tells other people when you're on video that you don't seem to be really interested, right? And so these are things to be aware of when you're communicating your brand, both in the workplace and virtually. So if we can go to the next slide. So I just found some of these stats that I thought were really interesting. And so we are, visual, as human beings, we're very visual, right? And so we see the success of Instagram and TikTok. We're just visual people, right? And so when I looked at this, one of the things that stood out to me was the brain can, if you look at that statistic, 1/10, the brain can get a sense of a visual scene in less than a tenth of a second. A tenth of a second. It's amazing. So when you pop up on video, right, someone is quickly assessing what's going on in your frame. Or when you're in your cubicle, what's going on? They're looking. They're trying to get visual cues on who you are, right? And they're making an assumption. And then 90% of information that enters the brain is practically nonverbal, right? So again, emphasizing the importance of nonverbal communication. Next slide. And so, one of the best ways to communicate your brand, right, is on video. And so, and this is funny, but the length of a video, it's a popular question. How long should my video be? And so anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. So if you're creating a video resume, then err on the longer side, the 1 minute. But 30 seconds to a minute is the ideal length. So I'm just really curious, because one of the ways that I see a lot of job candidates doing what they're doing lately is creating these video resumes. So I'm just curious, and we're going to drop another poll in here. How many of you have created a resume video on social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn? Oh, I love it. Amazing. 87% of you are currently working on it. That's amazing. So TikTok is an area where a lot of career or hiring managers are looking at candidates, that and Instagram. So LinkedIn also, right? So LinkedIn, you have a 30-second profile story that you can create, but LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok are both areas that are growing as far as hiring managers moving over there and checking it out. So I'm really happy that all of you, and impressed that all of you are working on that. So next slide. Okay, so strategy number 5 is style your brand inside and out of the office. So again, having that consistency will lead to credibility. So how you show up remotely needs to translate the same in the office. So I'm going to go through a couple of ideas with you on how you can do that. So LinkedIn is one area in which you can really style your brand, how you can style your brand. And so by that, I mean your banner can incorporate a brand color that you feel highlights your attributes, your superpowers, your gifts, right? So you can leverage that banner. The headshot, make sure you have a professional headshot. And ideally, you want your face to be facing the words. If you have words on your banner, you want to, because that it sort of provides trust, right? Because you're looking at the words. So ideally, get a headshot, and however you create that customized banner to support your brand, make sure that your headshot is facing in the direction of any copy you might have there. Take advantage of the 30-second profile story. So I recently did one, and you guys can check it out on LinkedIn. I hired somebody to create it. I did the copy, and it's just a great way for you to introduce yourself, what your skill sets are, and tell your story in 30 seconds. Now, the pronunciation feature is great if you can leverage that. It's great if you have a hard to pronounce name. And so what you can do is just say, hi, this is Jackie Peros. Welcome to my LinkedIn page. And that's it. I think it's 10 seconds, right? So it's a great way for someone to hear your voice also, right? And pronounce your name correctly. Again, you can leverage brand colors. Color evokes emotion, and it's a really great way for you to support and enhance your brand. And then keywords. So keywords, I think, are important for job seekers and even for those that are currently employed or an early careerist. Choose those keywords that you think best represent your skill set and your unique gifts. And make sure it is weaved throughout your social media platforms that you're participating on, right? And another thing is that in your banner, you can also include transferable skills, right? So if an employer is looking at your digital footprint and they go to your LinkedIn page and they see these transferable skills up on top, right? Then they think, oh, okay, this person, let me read a little further, right? So it's a great way for you to really showcase your skill sets. And when potential employers are looking at your digital footprint, they want to see, what they're assessing is, what value are you going to bring to the organization if they hire you? So make sure you're clear on what that value is. We can go to the next slide. So strong brands are transparent brands. Again, how you show up in the workplace and how you show up on video should be the same. And one thing I wanted to also talk about was wardrobe. So when we're working in the office, right, most companies have a dress code. Now, we are definitely moving into a much more casual, we were always moving into a casual direction before COVID, and now it's even more casual. However, companies have dress codes because they want to make sure employees project a knowledgeable and professional appearance to clients, right? And so it's important that when you show up in the office, that you're always projecting a professional presence about you and making sure you understand what the dress code is, right? And so there's the term called now work leisure, work leisure wear. And basically that's a combination of professional attire, but also incorporating this casualness that most organizations are moving to now. However, that casualness shouldn't translate to sweatpants or a sweatshirt when you're on video. And I've talked to a number of companies during the COVID time, and I've done a lot of workshops specifically just on wardrobe. And what they were struggling with was employees showing up super, super casual on video calls. And so when you think about the workplace, the future of work and the trends, that accountability piece really comes in because you want to make sure that you're establishing trust between you and your employer, right? And so if you show up on a virtual meeting and you're dressed super casual in their eyes, they may start to lose that trust that when you get on a call with a client, that you're going to wear that same attire. So again, just make sure you understand what the dress code is, and how you show up in the office should be the same how you show up on a virtual call or meeting. So next slide. So how are we doing on time? Oh, we've got plenty of time, right?
Yeah, we have about 20 minutes left. So.
Oh, we do. Fantastic.
Great. It looks
All
like
right.
we have a question from Caitlin, if you're ready to take questions.
Yes. Hello, Caitlin.
Hi, Jacqueline. My name is Caitlin. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I guess I should do a little introduction. I'm a master's student at Carnegie Mellon. I'm in their entertainment industry management program. I've been through several interviews. I took a few years off between undergrad and my graduate, and I have valued transparency in companies, but when pressed on it, I don't think I had a great answer in the interview. Do you think you could talk more about how you would define transparency in a brand and at a company?
Transparency with their initiatives?
Mm-hmm.
So, we've seen in the last few years, there have been a lot of, cultural issues that have come up, right? And so the transparency really is about how organizations at a high level are going to address those issues, right? And so I think, in the last few years, organizations weren't really, or have not in the past, been transparent with any of those cultural issues. But then all of a sudden things came up. And so I think they were struggling with how are they going to respond to these issues, and then the employees were not clear on what were the steps in which they were going to essentially handle it, right? So what you're going to see, and this is environmental, this is how are we going to address maybe climate issue? It becomes super important for organizations, right? Social issues. So what are they? And it's the organizations are going to lay that out and be transparent and say, this is how we are going to address these issues. And we want your voice involved in this. We want your opinions, right? It's again, going from that, me to we. How can we as a collective group address this? And it's not the organization being reactive, it's about them being proactive and bringing along the employees, right? Because we all have a different perspective. And so if you're managing that just from, that high level and you're not engaging your employees, there's a disconnect for them, right? So this is why we're going to see a lot of these companies, you're going to see a rise in this purpose-led types of organizations, because that's what people want. The last few years have really shown us that we have some work to do, and we need to make sure that we are in an environment. So it's up to employees, to job seekers, to understand, does this company work for me? Here's my purpose. Here's how I feel I fit in. Does this organization make sense for me?
Thank you. Great answer.
Sure. Let's see, do we have anything in the chat? One thing I'm just curious about, and you guys can just, do it in the chat. Let me know which one of these strategies resonated with you the most. Was it 1, 2? Well, 1 was understanding the hybrid policy. 2 was building your brand community. 3 was putting your best brand forward. 4 was, what was my 4th one? 5th one was style your brand inside and out, and communicating your brand. So I'm just curious, which one of those worked best for you or resonated the most with you? So Caitlin, building brand community. Number 3, brand community. Awesome. Building brand community. So brand community, yeah, I'm so happy that a majority of you are saying brand community, because it's one of the things that I spend a lot of time on with my clients. And I think one of the things that all of you need to understand is when you build a strong brand community, that community becomes your brand ambassadors, right? So they take your brand outside of your immediate community, right? And so you don't have to work as hard on your brand because you've established a really strong network. So I'm really glad to see that brand community definitely resonated with all of you. So do we have any more questions? Communicating with impact too. Yeah. One of the things that I'm super passionate about, and it's the brand community, but also working on communication strategies with my clients. And I work with early career professionals. And when you do that work in the beginning and you really do a deep dive on who your audience is, who needs to know you in order for you to achieve your career goals, right? And once you know that, you need to build a communication strategy. So it's taking your thought leadership and branding it, having a point of view. It's the visual aspect, but it's also the communication piece. How do you want to show up to your audience, right? What's the tone that you want to convey, right? Is it a friendly tone? Is it more professional? Is it, funny, charming? So I think doing that work in the beginning really lends itself for you to be really successful in the workplace, particularly now that we move into this new hybrid model, because you don't want to have a disconnect how you show up in the office, and then there's a disconnect to how you show up virtually, right? So again, looking at, really pay attention to your video frame. What's in your frame that could highlight your brand a little bit more, right? So maybe you love to travel. So maybe there's a map in the back, right? Behind you. And that could be a point of communication for somebody to get to know you a little bit more. Oh, that's really interesting. Where did you travel to? I love interior design. That would be a side hustle if I had time for it, right? So in my frame, and I love fresh flowers and that stuff. So in my frame, if you notice, I have a painting. It's one of my favorite paintings, and I have fresh flowers here. So it's just a little bit to convey to all of you that I love this stuff. This is a little bit about me, right? And so I was on a work call, I was on a virtual meeting once, and somebody said, oh, I love, I'm big into arts, and knew who this artist was. And so it just opened up, some communication about that. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But for you, just make sure that when you're taking that virtual, whether it's an interview or it's a virtual meeting, just make sure that you're looking within your frame, see what's visible to your audience, and making sure that it's conveying a strong brand. It's another way for you to communicate, right? So it's important to take note of that. Make sure you have proper lighting, okay? Don't sit in the dark, right? Make sure that you are taking it in a quiet place. I live in New York City, and I know some of you do too. And so sometimes it's hard to not have, noise going on in the background, but try and plan for that, right? Just try and plan for, no disruptions while you're on that call, and just be engaged, smile, remember to smile, and pay attention to your body language, right? That's what you can do when you're on virtual meetings. It's really communicating your brand with impact. Do we have any additional questions?
Yes, so we have a question from Erin, if you want to take that one.
Sure. Hi, Jacqueline. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Erin.
I love your strategy and the way that you've laid out so clearly the way to brand yourself really, really well. The question I had was, you mentioned that you want to be consistent on and off the screen as far as branding. What is and then there's also this movement to have a really good work-life balance and kind of separate your career from your personal life. How do you kind of marry these two ideas by being consistent and also striking that balance?
So I think just having the mindset that this is where you want to go in your career, right? So it's establishing those goals, where do you want to be in 1 to 3 or 5 years, right? And so when you think about your brand, where do you need to be so that you're visible to those people that need to know you, right? And so there is a balance. I'll give you an example. I used to have an Instagram account that was both personal and professional. And then I had my daughter, she's now 6.5, but I had my daughter, and I would post some pictures. And I really then said, you know what? I don't want people that I don't know that well to see images of my daughter, right? I wanted to maintain her privacy. So I created another Instagram account that enabled me to, to communicate my brand, but not have my daughter involved in it, right? So there is this balance where you have to kind of say, okay, well, what can I put out there that won't damage my career? So all of you are young, and you have social lives, right? So how can you put some fun images out there, but not have them damage your reputation, right? And so, you can go to private on some of your social media accounts, right? Go to private and just make sure you're visible to those that need to know you, right? So if it's LinkedIn, so be on LinkedIn. That could be your professional platform, right? For showcasing your brand and communicating your brand. So stay there, be visible to your audience, and network there. But if you find that, you want to create another business account, like an IG account that demonstrates your value that you offer, then put those things in. I think Instagram, because we are such visual creatures, Instagram could be a way in which you demonstrate your unique skill set, right? And you can put some video up there so people can hear you, an employer can hear you, and communicate your point of view, because you want to end up in a place that's going to value you and your point of view, right? So you can create a separate Instagram account and have that showcase your point of view. Maybe there are quotes that you really love by authors that you love, and you want to put that up there. You want to put your 30-second or minute resume video on TikTok. So those are ways, so you can do that, have an account specifically for that. And so when you're communicating with potential employers, you can direct them there. say, oh, if you want to check out some more information about me, go here. Does that answer your question, Erin?
Yes, it absolutely does. Thank you.
Great, my pleasure.
Great. So any, as we're going into the networking sessions in the next part of the summit, students will really have an opportunity to like kind of give an informational like networking and like meet with different company representatives. So do you have any like parting advice for them as we go into these sessions? We're going to be randomly putting students with different companies. So as they're getting to know the company, like what questions they should be asking and how to introduce themselves.
You know, I would first and foremost just try and get out of your comfort zone, right? And so I think sometimes we feel intimidated by networking. We don't know that person. So be bold. And I know this group. I've been doing workshops for a number of years with all of you. And so you guys are on point, and I know that you have a lot of confidence. So just, you know, understand who it is that if there's a certain company that you want to begin to build a relationship with, just say, oh, I've been really interested. I'm really interested in your organization, or I've been following your company for many years now. I love how you do X, Y, Z, right? Or I really appreciate how you go to market with something, you know, or I really appreciate the creativity that your organization always comes out with. Something that will spark additional conversation, because then that person will say, oh, thanks so much, you know, and then you can have that mutual conversation. So be bold, be confident, and think about what you're going to say before you walk up, because I think sometimes if we don't play it out in our head, we don't plan, we kind of stumble, right? So if there's a company that you are looking to work for or build and nurture a relationship with, you know, say, oh, I really respect your organization, and, you know, take it from there.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions right now. So thank you so much, Jackie. All of your whole presentation was so helpful. I was definitely taking notes, and I know the students here also benefited from your advice. And that networking story was really cool as well. It was so great to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but again, it's, you know, a lot of the attendees are just super confident, but it's, again, when you're networking, always think about how you can add value, right? Both parties adding value. So that's why I thought that example was a great demonstration of how when done right, networking is super, super effective. And I also just wanted to throw it out there that if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. I think Kate, my contact information. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, find me on IG, it's JMP Branding. It's a fairly new account that I separated from my personal account, but also my email address. If anyone has any additional questions now or 6 months from here, I'm available, and just go forth, be bold, brand yourself. You're all fabulous, and really take advantage of this amazing opportunity, this summit, and network and build your brand community.